Gaelan, one of the main platforms of your campaign is sustainability in Vermont. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's, I mean, for me, that's what it really is all about. I don't have a left-right ideology. I agree with Republicans on some things, Democrats on the other, and what's the common ground? What's the future that we can create here, and how do we do it? I think that the good news is that we don't actually have to invent any new technology. We just have to use what works, and we have to get together at the local and state level to make those investments. So it's, to me, it's about food, fuel, and finance. We need sound local food, local energy, and local financial systems to sort of make the investment in those other two systems work. And so there's agriculture, there's energy, there's production. You know, I've seen a statistic that Vermont imports 95% of its food, but that the value of the total agricultural production, which is mostly exported, is equivalent to around 37% of Vermont's annual caloric food intake. So, you know, it's not a huge challenge, really, to diversify our food away from monocrop milk types of agriculture to diversified food. It wouldn't take millions and millions of dollars to create local food distribution and processing systems for each town or each county so that all the local farmers could send their carrots and whatever to it, and it gets processed, frozen, preserved, distributed. You know, we've got farmers markets in every town. We've got more organic farm acres in usage per capita than any other state. So, you know, we have a bunch of things that we've been building as a culture for years that are in our favor for that. If we were to really shift our food economy to, on one hand, maybe tax imported food, and on the other hand, to provide some kind of a transition subsidy to help milk farmers get off of milk. A huge part of my family is on the dairy side of things still, and their problem is that for them to just switch off and transition away from milk to diversified production, that's a huge leap for them to do. So the state needs to help that transition with capital, with systems, with incentives. That's a huge opportunity to create a lot of local jobs and to save at least $1 billion a year as a state in terms of local money kept in the local economies versus imported food. The same thing with energy. You know, Vermont could we could create all of our thermal energy with biomass, with wood chip, and with chunk wood, with people using wood instead of oil and propane in their homes. I did the math on that as well. It would take about 1% of Vermont's standing forest to heat every house in the state. And harvesting 1% of our standing biomass resource every year is totally sustainable. Like, you know, there's more wood that rots in the forest every year, standing deadwood, than we're already harvesting. There's a huge resource being wasted that would, again, create tens of thousands of local jobs, would save us billions of dollars, because right now, if you switch from propane to wood to heat your home, you're going to cut your heating bill by at least 60% right now. No brainer, right? Why have these concepts not taken a policy position in the state of Vermont? It's just because we haven't made it a priority. Same thing with feed-in tariff programs for solar, wind, and biomass and other electricity sources that we could do, hydropower. You know, all we need to do is say we're going to make the grid in Vermont a real free market, and anyone can put solar on their roof and become a power company and get paid an equitable price for that energy. And then that's all we have to do. Another really interesting example that gets into the sort of federal overhead that we're crushed by in some extent. Take the $1.5 billion that we're spending on the military as a state right now. That would make 50,000 homes in the state of Vermont, about a quarter of our homes, completely powered by solar power. That would cover the cost of putting 25% of our homes completely powered with solar energy. That for the next 30 years they have zero energy costs. You know, however you spread that money out. If you give half that money to everybody, you could put 100,000 homes being powered by the sun. It would instantly create a huge green economy here in terms of producing these systems if we made a commitment like that. So, you know, the point I get to on all of the energy side and the food side is that this isn't just something to do because it's green and you want to feel green and good and, you know, progressive. It's literally a survival issue economically, in that we would literally save multiple billions of dollars a year as a state instantly by doing these things. And so why is it taking so long, and why are we, you know, twiddling our thumbs when we know these economic models play out? There's no question about it.
The solar panels that your company produces, all that work is done right here in Vermont.
Well, we don't
isn't it?
produce the panels. We install them here.
Oh, they're produced.
So there's a lot of engineering that goes into putting all the pieces, parts together and figuring out what works with what, but there's no electric panel production in the state. There is a company that's negotiating with the state right now to use one of IBM's former buildings to actually produce them. You know, if we made a real commitment with a long-term feed-in tariff program, that would blossom. I mean, Vermont already has a couple national leaders in solar in terms of installation. We have a couple of global leaders in wind power in their category. These things are here. The capital is here in terms of people. The capability is here. The financial capital hasn't shown up yet because there hasn't been a long-term commitment to prioritizing domestic energy production. And when I think about sustainability, I really look at Cuba. Cuba went through their peak oil collapse 20 years ago, and it was rough. They had a gravy train of cheap oil and materials from the Soviet Union, and it disappeared kind of overnight. And they had a couple years of a rough time. But they had already developed models on how to move from centralized agricultural production to decentralized organics, and they just put it into place. And they put 400,000 oxen online within 2 years to replace all their tractors. You know, I think Havana produces something like 80% of its food within a mile of city center. You know, they did it. They made food and energy locally, and it's one of the reasons that they've survived. Everything's not all rosy in Cuba. I don't mean to hold it up as some everything's perfect example, but they also have
healthcare
leading healthcare indicators. I mean, you know, there's examples here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's kind of where I'm coming from. And
darn good baseball.